Hi, Ron here from Military Images Magazine with a new episode of Life on the Civil War Research Trail. Today, I'm thinking about the approaching 160th commemoration of the Emancipation Proclamation, and my research mind turns to how slavery polarized Americans like no other issue in the 19th century, and arguably in our nation's history. I recall an anecdote I discovered a couple of years ago while researching Civil War chaplains. It was written by an anti-slavery clergyman from Massachusetts. Here's his picture. His name is George Hepworth Hughes. Hughes served on the staff of Major General Nathaniel P. Banks in Louisiana, part of the Gulf of Mexico military department during the early part of the war. Banks, for those of you who know, a savvy politician, but not the best Civil War general, sent Hughes on a tour of Louisiana plantations to document the horrors of slavery. Hughes's writings became a book titled The Whip, Hoe, and Sword, the Gulf Department in 1863. It's a pretty powerful book, and it captures Hughes, his reaction. Here you've got a clergyman from Massachusetts, a Unitarian minister who has preached from the pulpit on the horrors of slavery. All of a sudden, he's now in Louisiana in the heart of the major plantation country, and he's meeting actual plantation owners. Imagine the interaction of these two diametrically opposed forces. The spirit of that is captured in Hughes's book. And I want to share an anecdote which I think reveals that tension in all of its power and all of the immediacy and the urgency that one would find in 1863. So here we go. Here's the quote. Here's the anecdote. Up the river, down the river, and far in the inland parishes, you will find honorable men of good family who would resent an insult to their personal honor with sword or pistol, and yet are knowingly, willfully, and inhumanely cruel to their hands in order to get a large crop. They cheat the Negroes out of their food and out of their clothing. They use the whip with infernal license, and all for dollars and cents, and at the same time sneer at your prudence and mine as evidence of stingy souls. These very men, when you call on them as a friend, will bring from the cupboard their rich wines and charm you by their conversation, as they tell you that their slaves do just as they have a mind to, and that they are losing money on them every year, but keep them because they love them next to their own children. They are lying to you all this while. They are lying systematically. And if you will take the pains to go into the slaves' cabins at night, you will find out how much these men love their slaves and how much the slaves love their owners. I have heard all this rhetoric of the planter, and at first I believed it. I began to think slavery was really a patriarchal institution, that the owner was a kind father to all his people, feeding them and clothing them and caring for them tenderly when they were ill. But one day, after I had listened to a long chapter of this kind, I was driving out of the gate when I was stopped by a mulatto girl who held something in her hand, which she evidently wanted me to examine. I reined up the horse when she put into my hand a thick iron ring, which she had been compelled to wear about her ankle until it had made a festering sore. 3 others who knew our mission came up, and one showed my friend Wheelock his bare back, which was cut and gashed by the lash that had been applied only 2 days before. And I said, a Southern gentleman, a man who despises money, will, after all, lie. I afterward found this to be universally true. You may talk with a planter upon almost any subject, and you will find him affable and gentlemanly. He will scorn to misrepresent an event and will speak with commendable charity of his neighbors. The moment, however, the conversation edges towards slavery, his demeanor changes. He either grows reticent and refuses to say a word, or else becomes angry and openly insults you on the spot. There is no such thing as a calm discussion of the subject with him. He seems to think that any assertion, true or false, is fair. If he can adduce facts, he will pile them up until at last you begin to think the best thing the Almighty can do is to get up an extra generation of Negroes for the use of the Southern sugar planter. If the facts are not readily handled, he hammers away at the Old Testament, quoting verse after verse, trying to prove that the venerable book has no higher mission than to afford favorite texts for the slaveholder. If you suggest that the thraldom of a race impedes civilization, and is it inhumanity done to enslaved, he harangues you on the value of the institution as a missionary society. So there you have it. One anecdote in George Hepworth Hughes's 1863 book. It's fairly obscure, but it's worth checking into. I'll put the post here at the bottom, or I'll put the link to the book at the bottom of this post. So until the next episode, take care. Happy trails.